The film industry has been remembering the Jurassic Park star Sam Neill, who has died unexpectedly at the age of 78. Richard E. Grant called him an officer and a gentleman in the truest sense.
Some actors don't just entertain us, they become part of our lives. For millions of fans, Sam Neill was one of those rare stars. We watched him face dinosaurs with courage, but nothing prepared us for the difficult reality he's facing now. At 78, heartbreaking news about the beloved Jurassic Park legend has left fans around the world emotional, reminding us that even our greatest heroes are never immune to life's hardest battles. The news that did not feel real. On Monday, the 13th of July, 2026, a short message appeared on Sam Neill's own Instagram account, the same place where he had spent years posting silly little clips of his farm animals and his wine. It did not come from a publicist or a film studio. It came from his family, who wrote that the Wanu of Sam Neill were sharing the news of his passing in Sydney, Australia, and that he was 78 years old. They told the world he was surrounded by family and that he passed with the same dignity that had shaped his whole life. Then came the two words that stopped everyone cold, because his death was described as sudden and unexpected, and the family took a moment to thank the staff at St. Vincent's Private Hospital for their care. That same family message told the world that Sam remained cancer-free when he died. He had not lost the long war everyone assumed would eventually take him. He had won it. And if you look back at the final weeks of his life, you can almost feel how alive he still was. On the 11th of June, he turned up at the ARIA Hall of Fame Awards in Sydney, grinning in selfies next to Kate Ceberano, Jenny Morris, and the singers Vika and Linda Bull, calling them four women he had idolized for decades. Standing right there with him was Jacinda Ardern, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, whom he warmly called another hero. That very same day, he posted a quiet little video from his farm, showing himself gathering olives, with a caption that now lands like a stone in your chest, because he wrote that the crop was very small this year and that he was not sure why. 10 days after that, he shared the news that he had been nominated for a Silver Logie for his work in the drama The 12, thanking a cast and crew he clearly adored. The ceremony was set to air in August. He never got to see it, so the painful question sits over all of this like a shadow, which is how a man who beat one of the deadliest cancers in medicine, a man still collecting olives and award nominations, could die with no warning at all. To understand that, you first have to understand exactly what he survived. The war he had only just won. The trouble first announced itself in the least glamorous way you could imagine. While Sam was doing press for Jurassic World Dominion back in 2022, he noticed that the glands in his neck had swollen, and the answer that came back was brutal. He had stage 3 angioimmunoblastic T-cell lymphoma, a rare and aggressive blood cancer that most people have never even heard of. What followed was a fight he described with that same dry humor he brought to everything. He went through 4 rounds of chemotherapy, and within a little over 2 weeks the hair vanished from the top of his head. The first medication did not do enough, so his doctors moved him onto a newer and very expensive treatment, and he struck a deal with the drug company that still gives me a chill when I read it. His treatment would be free, he was told, if he was still alive after 4 months. While all of that was happening to his body, he did something that probably saved his mind. He started to write. He later admitted he never set out to write a book at all, but he could no longer go to work, and he needed a reason to get out of bed. He said he would lie awake at night thinking about what he wanted to put on the page the next day, and that the writing quietly gave him something to live for. That turned into his memoir, and after his 4th scan showed the cancer had fully retreated, he wrote a line that reads very differently today, telling his readers that he was now a living man, with every intention of going on living and living and living. But this cancer was patient, and it came back for him. The treatment that had been holding it off eventually stopped working, and he never once pretended that was anything other than terrifying. He said plainly that the chemo had failed him, that he was at a loss, and that it honestly looked like he was on the way out. His last real hope was a clinical trial in Australia for something called CAR T-cell therapy, a treatment that reprograms a person's own immune cells so they can hunt the cancer down from the inside. And against the odds, it worked. In April of 2026, he told the whole country that a fresh scan showed there was no cancer left anywhere in his body, and he called it an extraordinary thing. He had always insisted he was not afraid to die, that it had never once frightened him, but that dying would annoy him because there was still so much he wanted to do. This spring, it finally looked like he had bought himself all the time in the world. What almost nobody watching him realized was how he had already chosen to spend it. The fight he refused to walk away from. Instead of quietly enjoying his second chance, Sam Neill poured that borrowed time straight into a war for the land at his own back door. An Australian company called Santana Minerals was pushing hard to fast-track an enormous gold mine into the Dunstan Mountains of central Otago, only about 30 kilometers from the towns of Cromwell, Wanaka, and Alexandra. The plans were staggering. They called for a series of open pits, the largest of them close to 1 kilometer long and 300 meters deep, along with a tailings dam roughly 2 kilometers wide that would hold poisonous waste, including arsenic, sitting there permanently. Conservationists warned that the work could kill hundreds of thousands of native lizards. The company waved back with promises of billions of dollars and hundreds of local jobs. Sam did not sit on the sidelines and stay silent, and I think that says everything about who he really was. He fronted a short documentary about the threat. He joined the local community group fighting it, and he stood beside his old friend, the artist Sir Graham Sidney, at a fundraiser to help pay for the battle. He was careful never to sound like some anti-mining zealot, and he chose his words with real precision, telling The Guardian that he was not against mining, he was against this mine. Former Prime Minister Helen Clark stood with him. So did the country's own environmental watchdog, who warned that the project should be refused if its risks could not be safely handled. And then it got ugly in a way that clearly wounded him. The Resources Minister, Shane Jones, a man who openly loves the drill it all mantra, called Sam anti-Kiwi and dismissed the entire concern by comparing New Zealand mining to a beauty spot on the face of an attractive woman. A newspaper columnist mocked him as a wealthy hobby farmer fretting about the happiness of frogs. Worst of all, supporters of the mine began sending him threats of physical violence, some of them serious enough to be reported to the police. In one video, he looked tired and genuinely shaken, saying that what he had not been prepared for was the personal abuse, that he had been blown away by the sheer toxicity of it. Even then, he did not back down, telling the country that they truly needed to stop this filthy mine, or it would be the end of everything. To grasp why a sick man in his late 70s would take death threats over a patch of rolling hills, you have to understand what those hills actually were to him. What those hills meant to him. Those hills were not scenery to Sam Neill, they were the whole story of his family, who had lived in central Otago for more than 150 years, long before anyone had ever pointed a camera at him. For 30 years, he had grown Pinot Noir and Riesling on that land under his 2 paddocks label, joking that his only real goal was to make a wine his friends would enjoy, and that since his friends would drink almost anything, this had not been too difficult. He loved that place with a tenderness he rarely showed anywhere else, and he shared it constantly, cooking on camera during the lockdowns and comparing himself to the glamorous television chefs by saying it was like cooking with Nigella, only without the sex appeal. He filled that farm with animals he named after the famous people he loved, which became one of the sweetest running jokes on the whole internet. He had Laura Dern, the chicken, Kylie Minogue, the duck, and Helena Bonham Carter, the cow. He once told an interviewer that it did not always end well because a bird he had named after Meryl Streep was killed by a ferret, and he found her one morning as a sad little pile of feathers. That was the humor of a man who was completely at peace on his own soil, and it is exactly why he wanted nothing to do with the trappings of stardom. He said it himself over and over that he had friends who were huge stars, and he would never trade his life for theirs, because he could walk into his little local town of Clyde, sit down for a coffee, and nobody would bother him. He needed no security. He needed no entourage. He said being able to live like everyone else was a priceless thing, and he meant it with his whole heart. So when strangers began threatening the man over that same land, they were not just attacking a celebrity with an opinion. They were coming for the one place in the world where he felt most completely himself. And yet, for all that the land meant to him, the world only ever seemed to want to talk about the other Sam, the fame he never actually wanted. The version of Sam Neill that the world fell in love with was born in the summer of 1993, when he stepped onto a fictional island of cloned dinosaurs as the paleontologist Dr. Alan Grant in Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park. He delivered a warning that an entire generation can still recite about two species separated by 65 million years of evolution being suddenly thrown back together, with no way of knowing what to expect. What made his performance so special was the quiet arc underneath it, because Grant begins cold and awkward around children and slowly becomes their fierce protector. And Sam sold that whole transformation without ever raising his voice or showing off. He came back to the role in the third film in 2001, and again in Jurassic World Dominion, saying he had finally figured out how to be an action hero, all gnarly and grizzled and sure of himself. That gift of his was no accident either. He once said that good screen acting hints at secrets, at other lives sitting just underneath the surface. And that is precisely what he did. He never gave big, dramatic speeches to tell you how a character felt. He worked in tiny shifts, a change in the eyes, a slight pause, a look that could turn from warm to menacing in a heartbeat. It was acting so restrained that you often forgot he was acting at all, and it made everything he touched feel real. In that very same year that Jurassic Park turned him into a household name across the entire planet, he planted his first vines back home in central Otago. At the exact moment, the world was offering him the kind of fame most actors would kill for. He was deliberately pushing one boot into the dirt, planting roots he could return to. He kept a hold of that ordinary life on purpose, as if he already understood that the fame would never be the part that truly mattered to him. And to see where that instinct came from, you have to go all the way back to a frightened little boy stepping off a boat into a country that was not his own. The boy who learned to disappear. He was not even born, Sam. He came into the world as Nigel Neill in 1947, in Omagh, in Northern Ireland, the son of a soldier. When his father left the army and wanted to return home, the whole family sailed across the world to New Zealand, and Nigel arrived as a complete stranger at the age of 7. He was sent away to boarding school in Christchurch, a small boy with an Irish accent surrounded by New Zealand children, an outsider in almost every way that a child can be. He later explained why he traded the name Nigel for Sam with typical honesty, saying that turning up at school with a plum in your voice and a name like Nigel was simply asking for trouble. That was a boy learning very young how to soften his edges and blend into a crowd. And that quiet watchfulness never left him. He drifted into university to study law and walked away from it when the drama club got hold of him. He never trained formally as an actor, which he always wore lightly, and his first real break came in 1977 with the film Sleeping Dogs. An Australian producer named Margaret Fink saw something leading man about him and pulled him across the water for My Brilliant Career in 1979, opposite another rising talent in Judy Davis. His first real taste of international attention came, oddly enough, from playing the grown son of the devil in the Third Omen film, a role that opened door after door. From there, his range became almost ridiculous. He stood toe-to-toe with Meryl Streep, not once but twice. He played a Soviet submarine officer dreaming of a home in Montana in The Hunt for Red October. He starred opposite a barely known 18-year-old Nicole Kidman in the sea thriller Dead Calm, a friendship that lasted the rest of his life. He even sat down with the producer of the James Bond films as a candidate to take over from Roger Moore, before the role went to Timothy Dalton, which means he may well be the greatest Bond we never got to see. He chopped off a finger in the piano, lost his mind in Event Horizon, and terrified a generation as the cold detective in Peaky Blinders. He had built an entire life out of being underestimated and out of quiet, patient endurance, which is exactly what makes these final months so unbearably hard to accept. The verdict he never heard. The most painful detail in this whole story is the timing of it all. The official decision on that Central Otago gold mine, the fight he had thrown the last of his strength into, was expected late in October of 2026. Sam Neill did not live long enough to hear the answer. He beat the cancer, celebrated his heroes, accepted a nomination for a role he loved, harvested his small crop of olives, and then he was suddenly gone on the 13th of July, with the fate of the land he had bled for still hanging in the balance. The tributes came pouring in almost at once, and they tell you everything about how he was seen. Nicole Kidman called him one of the greats and said he had taken her under his wing when she was just 18. His fellow New Zealander Carl Urban called him a national treasure and truly brilliant, an inspiration to everyone who followed him. Toni Collette wrote simply that she loved him, calling him her hero and a legend. Richard E. Grant, who knew him for 3 decades, signed off his goodbye with the aching words, "Sail on, kind sir." The director Colin Trevorrow remembered a deeply soulful and beautiful man. His friend Rachel Griffiths said she would be cracking open 2 paddocks of his wine that very night. The prime ministers of both New Zealand and Australia mourned him, and Universal Pictures wrote a single line for the man who had run from their dinosaurs, calling him their Jurassic legend. And when you put the whole life together, the meaning of it lands with real force. For more than 50 years, Sam Neill made a career out of playing the calm and decent man that everyone turns to when disaster hits and the rest of the room is losing its head. In his final year on this earth, off the screen and out of the spotlight, he quietly became that very man in real life, standing steady in front of a stampede, asking a country to leave the land better than it found it, and taking abuse for the trouble. The cancer did not get the last word on Sam Neill, and in the cruelest twist of all, neither did he. The hills he loved are still waiting on their verdict tonight, and the fight he started goes on without him. So tell me what Sam Neill meant to you, and share the moment his work first stayed with you, down in the comments below.